men are better at STEM than women. And I know, based on those reactions, I can tell it's already a pretty tough pill to swallow and probably pretty hard to hear, especially considering I'm currently standing on a TEDx women's event stage, but it's something that has been whispered in classrooms, hard-coded into hiring practices, and echoed across conference stages, just like this one, for generations. And I'm sure that you all have heard it, and not always in plain words, but in the sideways glances that I got when I walked into the lab, or the way my professors rolled their eyes every time I raised my hand, and even eventually in the way that I started questioning myself before every answer I gave, every customer review I presented at, and every test that I took. But what if it's not ability that separates men and women in STEM? What if it's confidence? Now, here's the thing. You can probably already tell that I'm a numbers girly. So of course I had to look at the data, and turns out there's actually been quite a few studies into the so-called confidence gap. And the results show that women perform on par, if not better, than men in almost every level of education in STEM. But men are better than women in STEM, so how could that possibly be? Well, men consistently believe that they're better, and belief, as it turns out, changes everything. It changes who speaks up in meetings. It changes who gets promoted. And most important, it changes who feels like they belong. So the story that we're raised hearing where boys are better than girls, well, I'm here to rewrite it. So now before I dive in, let me introduce myself. I'm Caeley. Hi. I'm an aerospace engineer, and 6 years ago I started a nonprofit called Reinvented that has since brought science and engineering to over 500,000 girls worldwide. I have not one but 2 engineering degrees. I graduated with my bachelor's in aerospace engineering with a space focus, had internships at NASA, worked with the Department of Defense, ended up with job offers from all the big names, Boeing, Lockheed, NASA. On paper, I looked unstoppable. So imagine my surprise when in my first big girl job, that degree, that experience, none of it mattered. I was almost always the only woman in the room, and no matter how much I prepared, the message that I got from everyone there was clear. Nobody saw me as an engineer. I would submit technical reports and not be able to get them approved until a man signed off on them. I trained 2 men who were hired after me and watched them get promoted over me. So I sat there, all my feelings, frustrated and upset, but never showing that in the workplace because God forbid, right? And you know what I did next? I blamed myself. I went back to the fact that I grew up on that men are better than women in STEM. Just a simple truth, hard facts, right? But I'm pretty stubborn, so I did what any insanely stubborn woman would do, and I earned a master's degree in space systems engineering from Johns Hopkins. And I walked across that stage, snatched up that diploma, and thought, ha, there's absolutely no way that a man could look at me now and think I'm not smart enough to do this job. But whew, boy, was I wrong. Nothing changed. Absolutely nothing. So fast forward, new company, new work environment, started off great. It was a startup, and it was a little stressful, a little extra chaotic, but the mission was absolutely thrilling, and I was so in love. So in love, in fact, that I brushed it off when those patterns, being dismissed, talked over, all started to show up again. And then when they became too obvious, I pulled on this newfound confidence, and I spoke up. But we all know what happens to women who speak up against their male coworkers, right? Yeah. I got put on a PIP, or a performance improvement plan. And for those of you who don't know what that is, let me translate that for you. It's the corporate version of telling women that we are the problem. And that was it. The confidence, gone. Ambition, gone. The passion for engineering and space, gone. I had worked my butt off to do things right this time. But the moment that I stood up for myself, we fell right back into that rhetoric that we grew up with, that men are better than women in STEM. So I left. I poured myself into my nonprofit instead and really focused on expanding those programs that impact, and that's when I hit what I think was my lowest point. I made it on the Forbes 30 under 30 list for my STEM education work with Reinvented. Yeah, hang tight on that for a moment. But I woke up that morning to an email from Randall Lane himself congratulating me on this huge achievement, and I laughed. Let me repeat that. I literally laughed. I sat there in bed thinking, wow. I know I'm pretty good, but I didn't think I was this good. To fool Forbes? I like that Forbes. Yeah, I was collecting unemployment benefits, not touching the aerospace industry with a 10-foot pole. So deep in an existential crisis of not knowing what to do with my life, and I somehow managed to get myself on the 30 under 30 list. What a joke, right? I had dug myself so deep into a hole that I had no idea how to even start climbing out of. But that's when I finally realized. The problem wasn't my worth. No, it was that somewhere along the way, I stopped believing in my own capability. And I wasn't alone. Women are 3 times more likely to experience imposter syndrome versus men. And society actively reinforces this through the way women are treated in the workplace. But just knowing this doesn't really fix the issue, right? I mean, when girls speak up, they're called bossy and aggressive. I literally have a pip that says it. But when boys do it, we label them as leaders. When girls ask questions, we default to think that they're dumb. But when boys do it, we immediately see potential and curiosity. So girls, they grow up hearing that no matter what they do or how they act or how they feel or what they say, it's wrong. So they become shy, timid, scared even, and that confidence gap just grows. So by the time you reach college, which honestly is a feat all in itself, because statistically, most girls give up on the idea that they could ever be successful in STEM by the time they reach middle school. But by the time we reach college, we sit alone, choose that seat in the back, and pray to God that our professors don't call on us today. And it's not because we don't know the answers. I mean, women, we know the answers. But it's the fear of what will happen if we did somehow end up answering wrong. Or that we just might prove the people who said we don't belong right, and that's all it takes to keep us quiet. So, no, it's not that men are better at STEM. It's that we've been taught to measure brilliance by the volume of confidence. Not education, not experience, not even by our good ideas. And with nobody building us up, it's so easy for us as women to get left behind. It's easy to reject any inkling of confidence when you're the only one supplying it for yourself. But what if it wasn't just you? What if we changed the narrative? So I want to share a quick story. One of the programs that my nonprofit runs is called Princesses with Power Tools. Picture up there probably gives you a good idea of what that looks like. We literally get volunteers who are mainly women in engineering, like myself, to dress up like princesses and teach girls how to use their very first power tool. And at this one event, I had a girl run up to me. I was dressed as Belle. She gave me the biggest tag, pretty much jumped on me, and asked with these big curious eyes what I was doing. And I told her, I'm an engineer, and I can teach her how to use a hand drill. I saw the excitement light up, and just as quickly, I saw it vanish. The moment her dad, standing behind her, spoke up and said, "Oh, no, my daughter's not allowed to play with tools." So I quickly turned to the girl, giving her as much power as possible in the situation to agree or disagree on her own, and I said, "But do you want to use a power tool?" And she looked at me, I looked at her, she nodded, promised her dad that we'd be safe, and then we were both off to the races. And you know what? She kicked butt. She was an absolute pro with the drill, and when she finished her project, her dad turned to her and said, "Well, I guess now you're gonna be the one that helps me with my projects around the house." And she looked at her dad like she had just won a lifetime supply of her favorite ice cream. We changed the narrative in that moment, and we didn't just do it for the little girl, we did it for the dad too. Because doing it just for the girls isn't going to move the needle. This unconscious bias runs so deep that unless everyone starts believing that women belong in STEM, the confidence gap is just going to keep growing. So now I'm not saying that something like this can happen overnight, right? I mean, we've been working on this issue for decades, and the needle just kind of sways back and forth, but just close your eyes with me for a moment and imagine a world where women don't shrink their voices just to make others comfortable, where confidence isn't mistaken for competence, where we raise our daughters to believe what the data that we all know I love so very much already shows, that we belong in every lab, on every launch pad, and in every single boardroom. And you don't even have to change much to get us there. It's as simple as including your daughters in the STEM things that your sons are probably already engaged in. It's as easy as encouraging them to explore and be curious and not brushing them off when they inevitably ask you their 1,000,001 questions, why this, why that? And parents, if nothing else, remember this. Show your daughters other women in STEM. I'm a firm believer that if you can see it, you can be it. And I've seen that theory in action countless times through Reinvented and the Princess program. Confidence skyrockets the moment girls are given access to a role model. And my fellow ladies in STEM, I know, it's kind of rough out there, has been for a while. I know it, and while I can promise that occasionally dressing up like a princess and teaching girls or just playing with your own power tools will boost your confidence, my task for you is something else. It's to grow your community. We may be the minority, but we are mighty, and we are fierce beyond belief when we need to be. And it isn't as hard as you might think to find more of us. Between social media and ERGs, find your people. We always talk about climbing the ladder, but it's impossible to be successful without somebody at the bottom holding you steady, and without you handing that ladder back down for the next person to climb up beside you. So, no. Men aren't better at STEM. They've just been allowed to believe that they are. And I think it's about time that we all start believing in ourselves too. Thank you.